Timber Talks is brought to you by Wood Solutions. Stay up to date with the latest in timber, the building material that is strong, safe and sustainable. Here is your host, Adam Jones.
Today we get to talk with Nick Milestone, who is the chairman of the Timber Research Development Association in the United Kingdom, and Philipp Zumbrunnen. He's a director at Eurban Limited, and he's also based out of London. This is a two-part series where we listen to two of these world-renowned international experts on how the mid-rise timber building market is developing from the perspective of the United Kingdom. So in this part one, we're going to talk about the construction targets set for the United Kingdom for 2025 and how prefabricated timber systems, integrated design and early contractor involvement can be combined to meet these goals. The advantages timber has with the design for manufacture and assembly, DFMA, over traditional construction, and why we are on the cusp of a revolution in construction methods. And finally, the opportunities that we have to stimulate the manufacturing sector and the response of timber construction workers, what they have on site. So I really hope you guys enjoy this part one of the two-part series, and make sure you stay tuned for part two next week to hear the rest of the discussion. Here is Philip and Nick.
Yeah, I started my journey in the timber industry over 20 years ago as a carpenter. I trained as a carpenter in Switzerland, then worked a little bit for an architectural company doing timber houses, and after that I moved into engineering and I studied timber engineering at the university in Biel in Switzerland, which was one of the first universities in the world educating engineers on the special topic of timber. I mean, it's not only the structural engineering, it's all the other aspects as well, production, building physics and all that. Then I worked for a company in Switzerland, Blumer Lehmann, who's doing a lot of timber construction all over the world. And then 12 years ago, I thought, I want to see something new. And 11 years ago, I started with Eurban in the UK, and originally only for 2 years, and now I'm there for nearly 11 years. And I had a great journey. I was always really fortunate to be at the forefront of the timber industry, moving to the UK when it really took off, because before everybody was saying, the UK, what they do with timber, and that was a huge misperception, to be honest. And now I would say the UK is one of the leaders in the world with mass timber, or we call it solid timber at our company. But it's a great journey till now.
Okay, a completely different background to Philip. I've been in the industry for 32 years. I started life out as a trainee quantity surveyor for a building contractor. I then sort of fell in love with the world of specialist subcontracting. So my journey then took on a steel role for about 8 or 9 years, but then I trained and qualified as a quantity surveyor, then into project management, and then I did a further third degree. I did a master's in program and construction management, and I love absorbing knowledge and learning and applying it to the real world. That took me to a small fabricator in Derbyshire, very unfashionable at the time, and we grew it well up till really about 2008, and then of course the financial collapse happened and the world of construction was a very dark place in the UK. Prior to that, in 2006, we got onto we're listening to our clients, and it was Tesco's, it was the retail industry, and Sainsbury's. They wanted to go into mass timber or glulam structures as part of their corporate social responsibility on the low carbon agenda. And we took a leap of faith. So while the world was busy, we sort of diverted and created a timber structures division in-house. Well, we just didn't realise what we'd actually created. And therefore the recession came. And then we learnt this word about survivalism. How do we survive the recession? So we had to sadly close our steel fabrication facility, and we took a leap of faith into timber construction. And that was the best thing we ever did. So we took the same skill set of what were structural steel engineers, structural steel guys in construction, and they are wanting this life journey into timber. And it was great, and we started building supermarkets and universities and a lot of schools. And then, this thing came called CLT, out the Austrian housing market. And since we are quite an innovative bunch in the UK, based on survivalism ethics, we then realised what we could do with CLT. And of course, coming from a steel background, we never lost our roots, and therefore we generated this hybrid model of material integration and using the right material at the right place for the right cost. And then, of course, we've got this, the market demands change. Retailers calm down, schools programs die off, and then you're into the world of multifamily occupancy, accommodation, high-rise. You start looking at the markets. There's already an existing market of timber frame. Timber frame's limited in the UK to maybe 5 stories because of disproportionate collapse. Well, then CLT hits the sweet spot of that 5 to 15 stories.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And as an Australian interested in timber, I'm really interested to hear both your perspective on what's driving the market in the UK.
I think, as Nick said, in 2008 we all had to survive, and that was really how Eurban started 15 years ago. When my two colleagues, Jonathan and Liam, founded Eurban, it was really survival, because CLT was something completely new. They both saw it in Europe. They thought like that would be a great product for the UK. They showed it around to architects and contractors, and everybody was saying, oh, that's a great material, but who can engineer it? Who can build it? And that's how Eurban really came to life. I think on the first few projects was really curiosity of mainly architects and also some contractors who said, oh, can we try this new thing? Because we think, yeah, let's give it a shot. And that's how it really started. And then, as Nick already said, one of the big drivers was really the Building Schools for the Future project. I mean, that really drove CLT really high up on the agendas of main contractors. We built a lot of schools. We're still doing a lot of schools. I would say most of the CLT projects in the UK are schools. But then when the government changed, it really, it could be damaging for us. But funny enough, the timber industry, because at the time we had about three players in the UK market, and we all went off a little bit and said, okay, the schools are dying off slightly, let's move into something else. And then there was really the multi-story housing market, which came off. It's still, for us, some years it's bigger, some years the school market is still bigger, but we have these two big markets, and there are other markets which will come more and more. Or in Australia, you have now with International House in Sydney, you have a big office building. In the UK, we don't have that many office buildings yet. I think that's the next big market which will come more and more. But what we had in the UK and in general in the timber industry, because we're all really agile, we like to move. If something goes wrong with the economy, we can move really quickly because our companies are much smaller.
I was kind of blessed. I was part of a big construction group which allowed the freedom to do what we wanted to do as long as we could prove that the bottom line has got to be about your profit and loss. But I think what Philipp's just said there is it's been able to have dynamic versatility. It's been able to adapt to the market conditions, to go from retail to schools to housing to office buildings. You've got to be able to form building systems and solutions, and therefore timber is a big part of that journey. So looking here at the Australian market, I think everybody's used the word this morning, cusp, and it really is on the cusp. And I think the FWPA are here to be commended for what they did they addressed the issues correctly. They addressed the building code issues to allow mass timber to come into it. If you look at the US market right now, which will be phenomenal and at scale by the sheer demographics of their population, but they've got issues with their code level heights. So whereas Australia and US is very much looking at how the UK has adapted, we very much looked at our European friends. But our European friends, especially in Austria and Germany, they're restricted by their own code level heights themselves, whereas our building codes in the UK, our building regs, is more performance based, so it gives us a lot more freedom. Our heights are pretty well unrestricted, but do you know what, because it is timber and the perception of fire and durability, for us there's more of an enhanced focus on making sure that what we do and we do it correct. You know, it's really sad what happened and so tragic at Grenfell, and there you are typically where, you know, insulation was found to be the issue, combustible material, and that really is complicit of our industry to allow that to happen. That could have been avoided. Anything can be avoided. When we're using timber in construction, both in its temporary and its permanent state, will we address those issues front end? Because we want to give confidence and guidance to the end user that the building we're going to put up for him, well, is going to stand the test of time. And let's be honest, timber is the oldest form of construction. But it's the new revolution. So we had the revolution with concrete, we had the revolution with steelwork, and now we've got the revolution with timber construction.
It seems like I was reading a document, it was Construction 2025, and it's got these big goals of how to change the whole industry in the UK. Can you tell us a little bit about that and where mass timber or timber products fit into this longer term vision?
Yeah, take 2025 was about BIM. It's all about BIM. Building information modelling, building information management. It's about 21st century campfire, it's the collaboration, it's the early contractor involvement. Well, this is where timber fits in beautifully. Take the steel industry and the mechanical electrical industry. They developed BIM 20, 30 years ago, 20 years plus. My first ever BIM project was actually 1996, when we started bringing in Xsteel, which became Tekla, when we started to already use 3D, 4D and 5D modelling for manufacturing purposes. So timber is already taking advantage of that. The software that's available now with the advancement of BIM and under Construction 2025, you've got IFC file integration. That means we can work on multi-material platforms. It's just perfectly timed. Beyond Construction 2025, a number of other documents have come out. So now we've got the Modernise or Die from Mark Farmer, and that's all about taking construction to manufacturing. Timber's incredibly lightweight and versatile, therefore it's the most easily adapted material to work off-site. Concrete and steel are very heavy commodities that you can do little with other than create Meccano sets or precast concrete. Well, timber's got that versatility.
Oh, for me it's quite interesting because I grew up in the timber industry. I was always fascinated by that in Switzerland, and we'd done BIM for a long time. Design for manufacture and assembly was just inherited in the timber industry because we always did it. We always prefabricated stuff in the factory, brought it to site, maybe on a small scale. But you have companies in Central Europe, they're doing it since a long time, prefabrication with really high-end robots, CNC machining. That means we always had to design for that. We always used BIM. We just didn't know that there was something called BIM, because our models were always intelligent, but we never shared the information. And I think this is, for me, where the construction industry can learn a lot from the timber industry. It's not only about the materials, about the process, how we work, and it's the quality management we have. For us, it's normal, because we are checking from design, manufacture, and assembly on site. We have that whole chain, and that is also what we do at Eurban. We want to have that integrated, that we have the control over it, because we all need to build more housing. All over the world, in every city, we have a problem, and we can't really fulfill that demand. That means, for me, it's really important that when we build housing, that we build high quality, because we will never achieve the target at the moment. Maybe in 10, 20 years' time when we have a bigger industry, but now we can't hit the target. That means we should try to build good quality houses, and maybe we are still under the target, but it makes no sense to push out as much as possible and maybe build 1,000 houses more a year, but they're all really low quality. And it's quality management. It's checking the chain from the beginning to the end, and that's why we have such a big advantage against concrete. I would say steel is a little bit different, because steel was always off-site manufactured, but the concrete industry, they're really worried now. That's my opinion. Maybe they think something different, but because they don't do that much off-site. Yes, with the precast, but when you look in the UK, the precast manufacturing went really downhill. There are not that many companies anymore, because it was so expensive to transport it around the country, and it was so cheap just to pump concrete in its liquid form on site. But now with the whole drive to BIM, DFMA, and this 2025 paper, it's like people can see, ooh, that doesn't work. And having a construction site where you have 300 people compared to doing it in steel or timber, you have not even a quarter of the people.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few points there to pick up on. It is about the productivity journey as well. The Construction 2025 was about increasing productivity by 23% on UK construction sites. Well, the only way we're going to do that is faster programs and reduce the workforce. I'm very passionate about health and safety, and it's there. The more we do off-site, the less we do on-site. We're reducing the risk of incident and, God forbid, a fatality. But just take it on its head about the whole BIM journey, productivity, DFMA. You look at the Australian market. You've got to bear in mind that the UK timber industry, and I'm talking mass timber now, is probably around circa 100,000 cube. We still don't have in the UK a post-process facility. A steel fabrication company doesn't make steel, it fabricates steel. It cuts it, drills it, and it puts cleats on it. In timber, there's nobody in the UK that's actually cutting and drilling and sawing, because we don't grow sufficient quantities of material for CLT, albeit we can grow C16 grade, which would be ideal for CLT, but it's more reliable and efficient to come from source from Central Europe. The beauty about Australia is you grow the material. You already have that. You're already in the process through XLAM Australia and XLAM New Zealand of having your own supply chain here, which has got to be beneficial because A, you're going to reduce 6 weeks lead time transporting materials from Europe. All that's missing here is knowledge. And there is a vacuum of knowledge, but that's not unique to Australia, that's around the globe as well. You know, we've had this in the UK where we will need more timber engineers. Eurban have got a phenomenal model of recruiting timber engineers from Central Europe and retaining them as well. That's important, retaining them. You go to the US market, wow, great ideas, great potential, but where's the knowledge? You know, you've already got an existing stick-built timber market here, seeing what Strong Build are doing. Insofar as, well, they've hit the market differently. So take Eurban's business model. They hit it from a purist perspective of CLT. So I was the managing director of B&K Structures. We hit the market from a structural steel perspective. We put a different slant on it. Strong Build have hit it from the timber frame market and embracing, and it's all about that word, embrace and collaborate and early involvement and look at all the materials in the right place. For me, when we, as Trada, we wrote the National Structural Timber Spec, that was to make sure that timber frame, closed timber panel, LVL, glulam, CLT had its place amongst steel and concrete. What we found through building with the material was the exact precise close tolerances that we achieved off-site, which was akin to structural steelwork, which was more in line with tolerances than, say, concrete. So it's a great journey we're all on.
And that's a great point you bring up about the skills shortage. Do you have any comments there, Philip?
Well, I think most see that as a great topic, and when you compare my career path and Nick's career path, we come from complete different areas and we are more or less at the same place now. Yeah. And I think this is the great thing with timber, and this is what we should show also to our youngsters. You can enter the timber industry through different avenues. You don't need to go to university to become an engineer. You can start as a carpenter like I did, and that's what I take from Switzerland or Central Europe in general. It's this dual education system, and I think this is what we have to embrace all over the world, because a great timber engineer has knowledge about how stuff goes together. That means if you're a carpenter, you should be able to become an engineer if you want to do that. And it's further education, because the world is changing so fast. We need to give our youngsters the chance that they can come in also from the side, or other people which are interested in the timber industry. And I think that this is where the UK and also Australia, North America, we have to build more of these schools. We have to allow people to come in, and because we have now companies like here in Australia with Strong Build or Lend-Lease, Westbeam, they are pushing into the mass timber market. We will have a demand for people, and timber is quite a cool material. If you talk to young kids at school or university at the moment, they can see, oh yeah, this is great. We need housing. We want to be green, and timber is seen as cool. We have to take that there and give them the chance to educate. And this is also, every year we have internships in our office in London and in Switzerland. where we take young engineers or carpenters in, we show them around, or we run also an apprenticeship scheme with our site team. We, in the last 12 years, I think we had about 20 apprentices. And for me, that's an important thing because it's a skill level. Or with Brexit, we will have a challenge to bring in all the cheap labour from Eastern Europe mainly. And this is what the timber industry is. We need less labour, but we need higher skills, and that's what we can achieve. We can give kids who maybe don't want to go to university, who had enough about school, who want to work on site. We can give them an entry at the lower level, but then you can work through. And I think in the construction industry, you can really do that. You don't need to go to university to become something really high up, but we have to allow for these steps, and that's where I would say we can learn most from Central Europe with the dual education system.
So to overcome the skills shortage question, when we had the financial crisis, what I saw in the UK was 300,000 people leave the construction industry, either through migration, retirement, or just a change of industry. Then the tap gets turned back on again, and you sit in a room, and I'm 49 now, and I don't see many people younger than myself, which is sad. So what do we do? As Philipp just said, well, thankfully, we're in a manufacturing process. So therefore, we can stimulate areas of manufacturing again. We can bring manufacturing back for construction. People call it DFMA, I call it manufacturing for construction. But equally at the same time, let's embrace the digital journey. You know, I'd see my children growing up and they're using digital platforms like Minecraft. They love, it's almost like the online Lego. Yeah? Well, then let's embrace that because construction's going through a huge digital revolution right now. It's going through VDC, it's going through virtual reality, it's come from augmented reality, and that's what the attraction and the appeal is going to be. But we cannot lose focus and sight that in order to stimulate timber projects, we need to look at universities as like an academy where we can take architects and engineers and help upskill that. Now, FWPA are already doing that. Trada, we're doing our university engagement program by trying to look at the possibilities, what can be built with. Coming from a steel background and then building my first ever timber project in 2007 was just an enlightening experience. To use a material that you want to physically go up and touch, you don't want to touch a steel or a concrete building. Timber's just got this natural attraction where it offers the well-being factor, and that's the hidden value of the material. Ultimately, other than we've perfected the art of becoming almost like an IKEA flat pack of construction, let's not be crude about it, but that's the honesty about it. We are in a place where we're going through many versions of proving its capability in fire, its capability in durability, but more importantly, we're proving that it's cost viable because at the end of the day, it's all about the economic value. Yeah.
I think this is an important thing, and this is also about, in our business, we have a lot of young people. And don't get me wrong, all the young people at the university now or getting into their professional lives, they want, it's not just fun is one thing, but they don't want fun, they want a career. They want something they can get behind. And this is what, every morning I walk into the office, I see a lot of younger people than I am, which are really passionate what they're doing. And this is, they have a material which they believe in. It's natural, it's sustainable, but they can use the modern technology. It's not this backwards log home building industry anymore. And this is where I see the future really positive, and that's where we have to embrace it as companies, but also as individuals, to give them the chance to grow in the industry, because that will also change our industry. We have to change the industry from inside. We need to allow more young people in. We need to allow more women in. We need to allow people in who had another job before, because that will embrace, that will strengthen our industry.
That's a fair point. We need more women in construction. We need to create balance. We're a very archaic industry, very male-dominated, where we've got playground mentality and behaviour. We've got conflict. And we have and Australia is no different to the UK in how it procures buildings. Yes, we've got the radical changes of your Katerra, of Lend-Lease and Strong Build, who've really gone down the vertical integration route. But that's fantastic. But the negative is it's not selling to the rest of the chain. And therefore, we need to address each market and where the gap analysis is and what the market needs as well. Yeah, we were lucky in Eurban and BK Structures because we were importing the material. So the only IP we were offering was design and construct, and manufacturing was somebody else's problem. Whereas now that's evolving, where we now need more manufacturing in the UK for post-processing. I do think Australia is on the cusp, but I do think you've got, to be honest, a better infrastructure already to address the market. And despite what the population is, 23.5 million?
Yeah, just about that.
Do you know what? I see more opportunity here than I am seeing in the US right now. I've just had a small sabbatical in Singapore where they've got a reverse Brexit situation. They're trying to control migrant labour into Singapore, and therefore they're looking at not just timber but steelwork. They're looking at more productive technologies to reduce labour on a construction site in Singapore. But equally, they've had a huge journey in, how do we get mass timber into Singapore? The reality of it. And we've just recently written the mass engineered timber handbook to give guidance to new developers and stakeholders. Different concept there. There's a lot of government funding, a lot of stimulating that's top-down driven. We've come from an environment where it's supply chain driven, and you have to preach to the traditionalists.
So that was part one of the two-part series. Next week we're going to talk about how a holistic view is the key to enabling construction gains in timber projects, and why the approach to timber buildings needs to be designed from a different first principles paradigm, and how Australia is in a really unique position to develop a sustainably sourced supply chain to enable a growing market. So stay tuned for that. If you want to use timber on your next projects, there are over 45 free technical guides that can be found on the Wood Solutions website. Technical Guide 37, which focuses on the steps to deliver a mid-rise timber building, is a good start.